Hi, this is the case study presentation on cirrhosis, a condition of the liver. For this case, we have a 45-year-old male with a history of hepatitis C virus infection and now has cirrhosis of the liver. He was brought into the emergency room by his family members for the acute mental status changes that they noticed. They observed sleep pattern alterations and his mood and personality had been changing. Upon examination, he appeared disoriented and had evidence of icteric sclera. His abdomen is distended with a fluid wave test positive. He also has asterixis and hyperreflexia on a neurological exam. He was given a urine drug screen and ethyl alcohol screen, and both were negative. However, his blood ammonia level was noted to be elevated. All the other tests were normal. So what immediately jumps out at you regarding this case? For me, it was his patient history of hepatitis C and cirrhosis of the liver. It was also his mental status changes. The lab that jumped out was that the blood ammonia levels were high. Why are ammonia levels important? That's something you should keep in your mind. So at this point, you may be asking, what is cirrhosis? Well, cirrhosis is a condition caused by chronic stress, the inflammatory response, and widespread damage of liver tissue leading to fibrosis. Fibrosis is when normal tissues and cells are replaced with fibroblasts, collagen, and scar tissue, which over time impairs normal liver function. The widespread damage and fibrosis leads to increased resistance of blood flow within the liver, which can cause portal hypertension or high blood pressure in the portal system of the liver, accumulation of toxins in the bloodstream, ascites, hepatosplenomegaly, and many other widespread symptoms and conditions related to liver function. So, what may be cause of the disturbances in the patient's sleep patterns and the behavioral changes we observed? Well, ammonia is a metabolic toxin. Accumulation of excess ammonia in the bloodstream can disrupt many important pathological processes, including neurotransmission. To be specific, ammonia, which can also exist in an ionic form known as ammonium NH4+, is a competitor for potassium. Potassium is extremely important for membrane potentials in the brain and nervous system, which can cause significant neurological symptoms. We will go into further detail on the pathology behind cirrhosis later in the presentation. Throughout this case, you might hear of some terms that you're not familiar with. Here's some medical terms that are important to understand for cirrhosis. The patient was observed to have signs of icteric sclera. This means the white parts of his eyes appear yellow. This is an early sign of jaundice, which means the liver, which is responsible for taking up bilirubin and secreting it into bile, is not functioning properly. When the liver is impaired, excess bilirubin may collect in the bloodstream and spread around the body, causing this yellow pigmentation. The fluid wave test is a physical examination where the doctor basically taps on one side of the patient's belly and feels for a ripple. This is a sign of ascites. Ascites is an abnormal and excessive accumulation of fluid. So basically, the patient's belly will appear swollen. Asterixis is a type of tremor, often called a flapping tremor, and resembles the flapping of a bird's wings. It is often a sign of hepatic encephalopathy. Hyperreflexia is a condition of overresponsive muscle tone. and is also a sign of central motor impairment. Hepatosplenomegaly is an enlargement of the liver and spleen. Hepatic encephalopathy is a decline in mental status or cognitive function changes that are observed that is related to liver dysfunction and the failure to eliminate toxic metabolites, especially ammonia. So here's a good summary of facts surrounding cirrhosis and common signs and symptoms. As you can see, common causes of cirrhosis are alcoholism and hepatitis infections. You can also see that complications and decompensations include jaundice, weight loss, portal hypertension, hepatic encephalopathy, and other complications. If you look closely, you can see that portal hypertension can even lead to esophageal or GI variceal bleeding. This is a type of internal bleeding. If you remember from the case, our patient had symptoms of nausea and vomiting blood. So, why does cirrhosis have so many symptoms and manifestations throughout the body when the liver is damaged? How does the liver affect so many processes? Well, the answer is the liver is an extremely important organ and is critical to survival. It serves many roles in energy metabolism, synthesis of important compounds like glucose, ketones, and bile acid. It is responsible for storage of many nutrients. It regulates blood glucose and blood sugar levels. It processes and excretes many toxic byproducts and metabolites, which are very detrimental if they accumulate. So when this organ is damaged, these factors can manifest throughout the body. The widespread symptoms of liver damage are all tied to its biochemical roles. The role of interest for this case involves the liver's involvement in amino acid metabolism and the excretion of waste products, especially ammonia. The largest source of amino acids is dietary proteins, which are broken down in the small intestine into peptides or amino acids, which are catabolized in the liver. When amino acids are broken down, they release nitrogen. This is in the form of ammonia, which is a toxin, so it has to be eliminated. In a healthy physiological state, we excrete excess ammonia through the urea cycle. This cycle converts ammonia into urea, which is excreted in urine. Thus, liver disease and cirrhosis severely impacts these functions and leads to the symptoms seen. We will begin our biochemistry discussion with proteins. When you eat a protein-filled meal, digestion begins in the stomach. Stomach acid and pepsin begin to denature proteins to smaller peptides. In the small intestine, trypsin, chymotrypsin, and other enzymes further break these down. These smaller peptides and amino acids are absorbed by intestinal epithelial cells called enterocytes. Within these cells, more enzymes break the remaining peptides down into amino acids, which are then transported through the portal vein to the liver. In the liver, they go on to enter the urea cycle. So we know that ammonia is produced through the breakdown of proteins as a waste product from the nitrogens and amino acids in the amine group. All these waste products need to end up in the liver and need to be excreted. To reach the liver, ammonia must be carried by certain carrier molecules due to its toxicity. The glutamine cycle, which is the most common way, transports ammonia as an amine group attached to glutamine to the liver. Ammonia will then be split from glutamate. The alanine cycle is utilized to transport ammonia as an amine group on alanine from skeletal muscles to the liver. The transaminase enzymes AST and ALT are very important for these processes. They are also measures of liver damage in blood laboratory tests. They have a cofactor called PLP, which is a derivative of vitamin B6, which is also very important for this cycle. Now that the nitrogenous waste from protein digestion has arrived at the liver, it must be eliminated. The urea cycle is responsible for this. This is a series of reactions that produce urea from ammonia and bicarbonate in order to successfully excrete all of this toxic nitrogenous waste. The 5 major reactions and 5 important enzymes involved. And the machinery involved in this cycle is found only in liver cells. This emphasizes the critical importance of the liver's role in metabolism. The first reaction is the entry into the urea cycle. The compound carbamoyl phosphate is created from bicarbonate and ammonia through the enzyme CPS1. Next is the creation of citrulline from carbamoyl phosphate and ornithine, followed by the creation of argininosuccinate from citrulline and aspartate. The next reaction is the hydrolysis of argininosuccinate to arginine and fumarate. And finally, the hydrolysis of arginine to urea and ornithine. Urea is excreted and ornithine is recycled. Which enzyme in this cycle catalyzes the rate-limiting reaction of the urea cycle? That would be the first enzyme, which is the rate-limiting step called carbamoyl phosphate synthetase 1, CPS1. Here's a more detailed summary of the chemical structures involved and how they change throughout the urea cycle in order to eliminate ammonia. As you can see, the reactions of the urea cycle occur in the mitochondrial matrix and cytosol. How much ATP is spent during the urea cycle? 3 ATP molecules are consumed to carry out the urea cycle. It is relatively energetically expensive since it doesn't provide any energy in return. If our body is spending energy with no return, this emphasizes how important the cycle is for maintaining homeostasis. The major source of ammonia is from dietary proteins. When we digest these proteins, as we know, amino acids contain amine groups which have nitrogens. The nitrogenous waste is in the form of ammonia. What might be some other sources of ammonia other than the digestion of the protein that we eat? Some other sources include the turnover of proteins and amino acids in the brain and also from the body's muscles. We know that the patient's hepatitis C could have been a contributing factor to him suffering cirrhosis, but what may have triggered this acute progression and severity of his disease? As mentioned in the case, the patient exhibited vomiting of blood. This might be caused by visceral bleeding or internal bleeding, which is a symptom or complication of cirrhosis. The digestion of blood proteins in the intestines leads to the breakdown of even more proteins and amino acids, which only increases ammonia, which needs to be eliminated. If cirrhosis damages the liver and causes internal bleeding, which causes an increase in ammonia, which can't be eliminated due to liver dysfunction, this can be a precipitating factor and lead to acute and severe progression of his cirrhosis, and may also be the cause of his hepatic encephalopathy. As you can see, there are many factors that can combine and contribute to liver damage, causing fibrosis, inflammation, and impaired function of the liver, eventually leading to cirrhosis. This figure illustrates the many processes and pathways that the liver is involved in and provides a good summary of how this liver impairment manifests into the symptoms seen in cirrhosis patients. So what can be done to help patients with cirrhosis? The key to treating cirrhosis is early identification. If it is caught early, progression of cirrhosis can be prevented in some patients, and many efforts can be undertaken to prevent any complications which may lead to further progression of this disease, as seen in the patient in this case. Most treatments involve evidence-based management of symptoms and prevention of complications. Cirrhosis patients should avoid hepatotoxic substances, especially things like alcohol, NSAIDs, and other drugs or medications. It is also very important for patients to be vaccinated for the various viruses, such as hepatitis, that are known to cause inflammation and can further damage the liver. Some medications are used to aid in these efforts. For example, non-selective beta blockers can be used to treat hepatic portal hypertension and internal bleeding. The only cure for chronic or decompensated cirrhosis, or once the damage is irreversible, is liver transplant. In conclusion, this patient had a history of hepatitis C viral infection, or HCV, which is the leading contributing factor to cirrhosis in the United States. 80 to 90% of HCV cases will progress to chronic stages, and as many as 20% of those will lead to cirrhosis. The patient is now displaying neurological symptoms due to hepatic encephalopathy. This is most likely secondary to increased ammonia levels. The trigger for the patient's progression, or the precipitating factor to the development of this hepatic encephalopathy, was most likely due to the increase in nitrogenous waste resulting from the bleeding in the upper GI tract. Once cirrhosis progresses to hepatic encephalopathy, it is considered decompensated. This patient will eventually need a liver transplant.